I want to start off, before we do our Dharma talk, I really want to just pay some respect and honor to our ancestors. And most of us, and I'm not quite sure, maybe in the Bay Area, maybe in the East Bay Area. And so first and foremost, I want to pay honor and deep respect to the Ohlone people, in which they have so beautifully allowed us to be here on their land. So I want to pay homage and honor there. And I also want to honor my ancestors. Those from, my people are from Benin and Senegal and the mother continent of Africa and Europe and Ireland and the north and Birmingham, Alabama, and the south and the east and the west. And I want to honor them, and I want to honor all of your ancestors from all of the diaspora that you may be coming from. And thirdly, I want to honor the lineage that we're practicing in. This lineage that's 2,600 years old, starting in East Asia, Southeast Asia, migrating into Japan and China, Sri Lanka, and then eventually coming west. So if we can just take one moment, and I'll ring the bell in just a moment, just to feel into this holding that the ancestors are here for us. Calling them in, calling your ancestors in to say thank you. Thank you all so much. This evening, I'm going to talk about, the title of my talk is Waking Up, Calming the Mind, Holding Those Dualities of Our Times. And no one right now is unaware of the uncertainty of what's happening for us now. We're struggling to hold on to so many of the feelings of wanting to be urgent and actionable for change. And with a sense of waking up to the systemic injustice and racism that's rising in such a fevery pitch. And also for many of us, we're equally holding the necessity to bring our awareness practices, what we just did for the last 40 minutes, to the forefront of our experiences in order to navigate our mental and our physical and our emotional. We're trying to hold on to these places that are facing our communities, our families, and ourselves. And both of these places that we're holding are valid in our heart and mind consciousness. So none of it is void of not being valid. They're right here. We're present with it. But the question I'm always asking is, does this duality have to be separate? Does the feeling that we want to hold action and we want to hold ourselves in a calming manner, or at least calm and regulate ourselves, do they have to be held separately, or do they have to play out as polar opposites? Is there a way that they can coexist with both fierce response and wise action in view? Do they have to be mutually exclusive? Are they meant to create a symbiotic dance around the fire that's lingering inside of us? This fierce love for transformation and loving fiercely for creating a steady and stable being and existence. These are the questions that permeate as we're walking along this path that we've chosen. So tonight I'd like for us to explore this tenuous landscape that we're treading, and just see whether or not what we're in right now, given all the conditions, and we know what they are. I can name them. You could name them. We can say their names. We can say her names. We can say their names. All of these conditions, might there be a catalyst to finding a path to freedom and a certain amount of degree of inner peace? What I know for sure is that I am feeling the rumbling underneath my feet. None of us are asleep. We're all witnessing this horrific terror that's happening in our streets, in our neighborhoods, what's happening to Black and brown bodies, to our LGBTQI plus brothers and sisters. We all are seeing what's happening. And we have to applaud the Supreme Court just recently on two fronts. Thank you for being on the right side of justice. And there may be a sense that you're fully engaged in these earth tremors. You might be riding the waves of full engagement out on the streets. And yes. And yes again. Or maybe you're with friends and family and you're sequestered in place in our homes. And some may not even have stable shelter. These are indeed, we've said it a million times, it's almost overdone, unprecedented times. And yet I am really speaking to you from my heart because I'm coming to you as an elder. I'm coming to you from a place where we have seen so much of this horror. I have seen so much of this horror in my life. Most of this is not new. And yet, it's calling us to some type of action. There may even be a sense that you're seeing a state of humility that is different than you've ever seen it before, or the lack of humility through all the injustices. And that may displease you. And it begins, maybe that's the thing that's waking you up, or maybe you were quote unquote awoke before. But whatever you may be feeling, allowing those moments, those minutes, those seconds to really, really sit inside your body. Way too often, I know this for myself, I forget that what I'm feeling is I'm totally embodying. I mean, our bodies hold so many stories, so many memories, so many secrets, so many irreconcilable conditions that have caused us deep trauma and deeper displacement. But it's in these very places where these deep feelings lie that creates the movement for change. We don't have to look outside to access all of those feelings. They're right here. We're feeling them. They're in our bodies. They're in our breath. I don't know, there are times these last few months where I have noticed my breath being so shallow that I've had to almost take a deeper breath in order to bring it home again, as we were talking about in our practice period. Coming home again to the anchor. I have become so intimately aware, not only of these mental states that I'm walking through, but I'm acutely aware of what my body is responding to. The news, the social media feeds, oh God. And I'm also aware that I'm longing for touch. My body is longing for that way that we come together. I have only been able to see my grandson on FaceTime. Oh, that saddens me. I'm happy when I see him, but I know I can't. I'm really longing for the touch. And some of that is keeping us separate. And it's times like this that the Buddha spoke so profoundly and gave us these tools of the first foundation of mindfulness, the concentration of the breath in the body, not to be ignored. We said it at the end. Let's get back to bringing our attention back to our breath, allowing ourselves to feel what it feels like for our body to breathe ourselves and our breath to be constant and yet changing. So my invitation to all of us is, how do we investigate? How do we hold what may appear to be a juxtaposition, but between awakening and stillness? How do we begin to feel where our level of patience is, our level of mindfulness? Where have we been checking into our inner ethical compass? You know that place. I feel it here in my solar plexus. Or discernment, our mental qualities, our body sensations. And lastly, where have we been able to hold this place of renunciation and letting go so that we can better serve ourselves in self-care? I know for me, I've had to unplug. I just have had to unplug. Not that I'm not aware, but I can't take so much of it in. It's painful. I consider myself somewhat of an empath. So, I can feel the pain of what's happening on the streets. I can see the pain, what's happening in mothers' eyes. But honestly, whatever level that you're at, how are you navigating where you're positioned? And also naming your positionality in each of these qualities, whether it's your internal ethical compass, your mental state, your mindfulness, naming where you are in each moment begins to open up a larger field for discovery, a larger field for contemplation, with the hope that at some point, a teacher at Spirit Rock, Eugene Cash, always says, let's get real together. With all the aspects of waking up and simultaneously finding a direct and concrete path to calming the mind. So this evening, I'm using the word simultaneously here mainly to illustrate the possibility of holding both action without holding both, the sense of awakening and the sense of calming the mind, and making sure that we don't see that they're hierarchical and that you have to put one before the other. I'm sure many of you have heard this Tao saying, 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. These two are in direct relationship. They happened all together. There are times in my life, and I'm sure in yours too, where those joys and sorrows are happening within moments of themselves. So I use the word purposefully. Simultaneously, how do we hold both of those without separating out what's necessary? I think it's important to distinguish between our capacity to exist and what we might believe to be only one reality. It's either our cognitive or our heart space or our body, versus the truth of our multidimensional selves. That we actually inhabit multiple realities at the same time. We're not devoid of this. We have these great opportunities to actually witness and see ourselves play in this field of our realities. Our minds create a disjointed view of reality based on where our state of charge or calm may be and what we might be encountering in any moment. sometimes it feels as though we're creatures of our own making. I know it does for me. That my mental state becomes so activated that I feel like I'm riding a wave of emotions and deep conditioned feelings. And I don't want to discount them. I can't push them off. I can't shove them down any longer. But I do know that we struggle to free ourselves from that undertow of the wave, only to find ourselves in deeper waters of dukkha. And dukkha meaning that our suffering, it's the first noble truth that the Buddha handed to us 2,600 years ago. And it rings so true today. None of us are exempt from this place of suffering. And the causes of suffering are complex and yet very simple. Greed, hatred, and delusion. How many of you have not felt any of those? If you have, then boy, I really would love to talk to you afterwards. Because that's the element of our humanness. We all have those tentacles. Those kind of octopus-like tentacles that reach out and grab our hearts and minds. Turning a good day into a day of misery. Maybe it's a day of greed. Maybe it's a day of hatred, which we've seen so illustrated, so present. Or maybe it's just sitting in delusion. Whatever it may be, there's an opportunity to realign ourselves with our thoughts and actions. We have an opportunity to set the stage for realignment, to course correct, to move towards wholeness of intention, while still holding our passion and commitment to responses. Often when we think about the idea of awakening or waking up, because we hear it all the time, we become single-mindedly focused, putting much of our attention to what our desired outcomes are going to be. And boy, you know, when we do that, that is tantamount to more suffering. We see ourselves wanting things to be different, wanting the outcome or the result to be exactly as we want them to be. And sometimes, of course, that's not going to happen. That's out of our control. And wanting like that doesn't stop the suffering. In fact, it enhances it. And it becomes a cycle of wanting more and wanting more. This is the cycle of samsara. This is where we are on this endless kind of gerbil wheel. So the vastness of the concept of awakening has been on my mind, God, for some time. I mean, I've been wondering, where do I fall on the spectrum of being awake? You know, we always say it, wake up, be awake, be woke. Where am I? Is this something that I'm striving for? Is it something that's just laying inside me? Is it possible in these contemporary times, right now, not talking about 2,600 years ago, is it possible to fully awaken, even to possess a bodhisattva nature and still work for radical change in the world? Are they separate? Do we hold them separate, or do we actually bring them together? One of my dear teachers, Larry Yang, wrote a book, Awakening Together, the Spiritual Practice of Inclusivity and Community. I began to embrace the idea of waking up together, working for collective awakening, whether on the cushion through my teachings or within oppressive systems that need to be changed, defunded, and broken apart. But one thing I received from his teachings and his mentoring and his writing is that when we're on the path of community engagement and awakening, we don't necessarily break apart, but we actually break open. We allow ourselves more spaciousness. We allow our hearts to actually be seen and touched and heard. So I want to take a moment So we can look at this word awakening, because that's what we're talking about, this waking up. So it's a noun. And Webster's Dictionary, or dictionary.com now, says an act of waking from sleep. That's waking, awakening. Or the act or moment of becoming suddenly aware of something. And I think that there are many people right now who are waking up to the conditions, to the injustices that we see. But as an adjective, awakening is coming into existence or awareness. The way in which we're finding these words brings about a clarity to what may be assumptions of what we're saying. It also broadens our awareness so that if we understand the meaning of a word, it allows us to have some authenticity in our speech. I've heard awakening together with, kind of equated with, enlightenment. Like the Buddha's enlightenment, he was awakened. I've heard it as liberation. I've heard it as freedom. The ultimate awareness is awakening, among other terms. It's also been coined as a way to tell whether a person is attuning themselves into certain causes and root things, you know, such as, it really, after Ferguson, it started with Black Lives Matter. Are you woke? Are you paying attention? Are you fighting? Are you seeing what is happening in the world? In Radical Dharma, a book that was co-written by Angel Kyoto Williams, Lama Rod, and Yasmin Zadula, she writes this: it's not enough to know you want freedom. We have to practice it. We have to be able to live it out together. Remind each other how messy practice can be, but rally each other to keep it going. It might not make sense. It might not appear reasonable. Knowing we want freedom is a practice in presence, not fortune telling, not storytelling. There are no guarantees, no gold stars for having arrived on the other side perfectly unscathed. No chance for anyone nailing a perfect landing anyhow. So I truly love what Jasmine was saying. If you think of awakening as freedom or liberation, then we're asked to take each stride towards that end through practice. We must make ourselves available to all the messiness, for waking up that doesn't look pretty, or the perfect picture that we've designed in our minds. We have to look at our shadow sides, and even the subtle ways in which we approach our mindfulness practice with such high expectations. It's messy. So let's start to make it a little bit more real. And again, I'll mention my initial invitation to all of us. And the question this evening was, investigate, how do you hold the internal movement between awakening and calming the mind? How best are you navigating your own particular position? Is your idea of waking up taking action for, you fill in the blank, whatever that might be? Or living on the edge of rage and anger? Is that waking up? Is it fervently working for social, racial, and economic justice? Is that waking up? Is it dismantling systemic systems that are no longer working? Is that waking up? Or possibly, maybe it's and or, is waking up part of calming the mind? Is it finding refuge in these times of distress through the Buddha Dharma? Is it developing a daily mindfulness practice so that you can have some surety under your feet, some ground in which you could rest? Is it knowing that when you awaken in this moment, this present moment, you become more available? Again, fill in the blank, available for what? So I'm curious if we're able to lessen the mind's grip on how you believe these two concepts of awakening are separate and examine how they may actually be just two sides of the same coin. To move past fixed view concepts and conditions, but rather open to an expansive field that holds both truths. Holding that duality, seeing them as equal and not stratified. We often see the Buddha as a, sitting as a statue. He was much more than a statue that his eyes were closed, his hands were folded, or in a prayer mudra, sitting in a lotus position, passive. And of course, we're just using this word enlightened. The Buddha delivered over thousands of truth talks in his 45 years of teaching. His actions, although revered by many and followed now by many of us, were not always received with grace. In fact, he was taunted with critical judgments and threatened with harm for his messages of awakening. But he revolutionized what most Brahmins and ascetics of his time believed to be the awakened state. He didn't separate his message from his actions. What the Buddha realized during his awakening was that what clouds the path to freedom, and again, we're talking freedom and liberation and awakening and calming. What clouds that path are the obstacles fabricated by our mind heart. I want to take a moment and read a beautiful poem by a brother, a Dharma teacher, Larry Ward. I have been hurt by falling dreams, tumbling down like great stones from the mountain of hope, cracking open my heart. I have had the feelings of losing everything and the sound of being ground up by the world of endurance. Tired, sad, and weary, my heart overflows with tears. I have met my own fury coursing through my veins as a silent illness because life did not go my way. I even thought the moon stole my shoes. I searched everywhere over the green countryside, the crowded city streets, the brown deserts, the snow-capped mountains, and even the dust of stars. I found myself wrapped in clouds of doubt. In the softness of one holy night, the Dharma rain fell. The sky cleared. I looked down to discover that my shoes had been on my feet all along. My pure heart and pure mind have not been crushed or destroyed by this world's experiences of disappointment, hatred, violence, discrimination. My deepest desire at this moment is to be a poem and to live a prayer that encourages more love in the world. When I saw and read that poem, it broke me open. My greatest desire is to be a poem. This is the time for true wisdom. Settling into the long, deep practice accompanied by passionate action. Both are called awakening. Both embody an open heart, open mind, and a commitment to holding the dualities of those perspectives. Both are the bridge and both are the span. We have an opportunity in our lives right now to begin to look at how are we holding these two places, and can we hold them simultaneously? Can we work for change, feel the fire inside of us, and still cultivate the calming mind that we need in order to find the ground underneath our feet? This is what I ask. Is it possible for you to find freedom in all parts of your life? So in closing, I want to share that tomorrow, June 19th, is a day in which Black America will be celebrating Juneteenth. For some who don't know, it's a historical day when Texas, the last state, not only recognized, but to be informed that the 1862-1863 issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation was given. It took 2 years for the Union soldiers to reach Texas to deliver the news that slavery had been abolished as an aftermath of the Civil War. This declaration, the abolition of slavery and the resulting freedom, has been celebrated and quite honestly debated by Black Americans for centuries. And now, of course, we see people celebrating in support of Juneteenth. It again goes to the question, can you hold with all of its nuanced complexities the scales of justice and injustice? While some cheered and danced and paraded together with fond memories of days gone by, others, especially now in 2020, are still struggling with the concept and the reality of freedom. And our fight for equity and freedom to be seen as full human beings still continues. Can we hold all of the capacity of waking up, of this true awakened spirit, and still move forth with justice? Those are bigger questions, given the state of our hearts and the state of our world. And again, I'm coming to you as an elder who says, I am broken open by what is happening. But I'm also have a glimmer of hope and faith for what I see as a movement moving forward to be able to see change. And I may not see change in this lifetime, at least in my lifetime. The change that is what we're looking for, what we're seeking, what we're fighting for. But I'm hoping it will be for future generations, especially for my grandson and his children. So finally, I'm going to read a piece that was written by Tenesero Bhikkhu. It's called What We've Been Practicing For. In times of crisis, we often feel we don't have the time or energy to practice. But those are precisely the times when the practice is most necessary. This is what we've been practicing for, the situations where the practice doesn't come easy. When the winds of change reach hurricane force, our inner refuge of mindfulness, concentration, and discernment is the only thing that'll keep us from getting blown away. When we can be secure in our inner source for true happiness, we don't expose ourselves to the devastation that comes when outside hopes for happiness and security are dashed. We have our shelter, our place of security inside. And we needn't be afraid that this is an escapist shelter. When the basis of our well-being is firm within, we can act with true courage and compassion for others. For we're coming from a solid position of calmness and strength. So take heart. Do what you can to help the living, and dedicate the merit of your practice to the dead. We may be powerless to change the past, but we do have the power to shape the present and the future by what we do moment to moment right now. And in maintaining our intention to be as skillful as possible in thought, word, and deed, we'll find the true refuge there is. Holding our hearts and minds together, not separate. Not finding that we can no longer bring them together, but that we must bring them together. We must awaken in all of the aspects of our lives. So I just recently saw this quote, and I've seen it for years, and it just brings to mind what I'm feeling right now anyway. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Bob Marley. So family, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your kind attention. Sorry we have no time for question and answers, but I so appreciate your practice and allowing me to be here with you.